This is Walking Between Shadows. I'm your host, Ben Elliott, and my wife,
Karen Elliott.
Don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button. This episode begins now. Taryn, we're going to take this story back to Trenton.
Yes, we are.
And not only Trenton, we're going to take it back a long time.
A very long time.
Like way before we were born.
We're going way back.
This is before Trenton had a bypass even.
Right.
Yeah.
This is before Trenton had a McDonald's.
Yeah. So now the way you want to present this, though, is you want to present the more current case.
Right. I want to go back in time. So it's like we're going in a time machine and we're going to stop at 1954.
Yeah.
And then we're going to go back and stop in 1952.
So this is the Lover's Lane.
Yeah, this is a very highly requested case out of Trenton, Tennessee.
Yeah, yeah.
Where we grew up. So, yeah.
So we've had several people request it, and we definitely appreciate that. We want to say on the front end, please join in to the conversation. When you see this episode up, don't hesitate to make a comment, and especially those of you who requested this.
Yes, and I want to especially thank Denise and Becky for this because Denise did all the research on this and sent me so much information on these two cases.
Yeah, so big shout out to Denise.
Yes, thank you very, very much. You did a great job. Should do this for a living, girl.
Right on.
For real.
Right on. So anytime we need help, I guess we could reach out to Denise too.
I don't want to volunteer for something. Okay. Right. I don't want to do that to her, but that would be great if she wanted to.
Yeah. Well, before we get started, let's say we need to thank Benefit Can and ECT. ECT is the company I work for, and the Benefit Can is something that we decided to do a year or so ago when we heard that Missouri was going to be recreational with marijuana.
That's right.
Yeah, so we already had at ECT the Benefit Bucket, which was a grow your own food at home kit. So in other words, it was a bucket that came with the fertilizer and seed that you needed to start your own garden at home, grow your own food. And that was during COVID, and that was kind of our goal. And when we found out Missouri was going to go recreational with marijuana, we did sort of the same thing. But we made a few little changes here and there. So, for instance, instead of it being in a plastic bucket, it's in a pasteboard can.
Which is amazing.
Yeah, and
curing.
we do that for curing. And you and I kind of came up in the days of the jar cure. Mm-hmm. And it took forever.
Burping it. And,
oh, yeah. But these pasteboard cans, I've noticed people using in larger volume and stuff more and more to cure. It's probably the step of marijuana and hemp that gets overlooked the fastest. Mm-hmm. People see that stuff dry and they're like, I want something to smoke, or I need something to make some oil out of, or whatever. But what they don't understand is it still takes some time after that plant is dry for that to cure and develop the terpene profiles and stuff like it needs to be. So you can actually take an extra 30 to 90 days to do that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So
it's worth it, though,
Oh, absolutely.
Time to do it right.
Yep. It's definitely easier to use, and that's what we did. That's how we made the Benefit Can. It comes in that pasteboard can. It comes with all the fertilizers and starter powders and stuff that you need to grow the crop out from start to finish. So again, shout out to ECT and the Benefit Can bunch. Check us out on benefitcann.com or energycurve.com and see any of the products that are available from ECT. They're also available to purchase from right there on the website. And hopefully in the very future, if any of you listeners want one of these things or some items from us, just let us know. Send us an email to wtnknows@gmail.com, and we'll get you hooked up. We'll get you hooked up with a little bit of a discount there.
And we can put a link in the comments for the Benefit Can. Mm-hmm. And,
anything
we've been using it, and it's been doing an amazing job. So,
awesome.
Yes, absolutely try it.
All right. So back home.
Back to where we grew up, not home anymore, but hometown.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And the thing about it is, too, this is very closely related to us a couple of different ways. My family was involved in it as technicians or professionals, not necessarily the case itself. And it happened near your mom and dad's property.
Right. So this is going to be a two-part series. So this is going to be the first part, and we're going to talk about the 1954 Lovers Lane murders. And it happened, okay, so the Trenton Bradford Highway, right?
Yeah.
There used to be a road that that connected the Bradford Highway and Christmasville Road, right?
I think so. I think you're right.
And that was Lovers Lane.
One of them. It was the first one out of Trenton, basically.
Right.
And this was before Trenton had a bypass.
Right. But now, if you kind of want to pinpoint somewhat of an area,
Yeah.
it's privately owned now, so can't go up on it, but it is, it's very, very close to my parents' property, and it's very eerie because I have some connection to that and have some stories a little bit about that place, because I can remember being out there, and it would be just very, very late at night, and I would hear like gunshots, and it was almost like a echo of a gunshot, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I mean, that's kind of all you get's the echo anyway.
It's kind of like a ghost.
Uh-huh. Like it
Gunshot.
wasn't as loud as one that would happen, but it was not, it was almost like it was muted a little bit.
And I know that makes me sound kind of weird, but I always thought, well, there's probably people out there hunting and stuff, but then finding out now where that area is, behind Quail Ridge and behind my parents' property, there's nowhere to hunt there. I think there might be an old cemetery out there somewhere, but there is nowhere to be, right?
Yeah, yeah.
You tell me.
I don't think so. I mean, it's, so for reference again, is between Christmasville Road and the Bradford Highway.
Right.
And the old Cades Road that made up part of Lover's Lane back then, it was less than a mile off of where you turn at the bypass.
Yeah.
Yeah, so if you turn off the bypass going towards Bradford East, it's less than a mile up that road.
Yeah.
It's kind of where the old Lover's Lane was.
Yeah. And I know I've partied out there in high school in that area.
Yeah.
All kinds of good stuff. So actually touched that area with my own hands and feet. So I know of it, but I never heard of this case. And when this started being requested for us to do, I couldn't find anything.
Right.
So thank you again to Denise, because she brought this up and brought me all this information, and it's very interesting. So April 9th, 1954, 67-year-old widower R.J. Buckingham was a retired farmer and was kind of going through some hard times then. He had once been pretty successful. He was a farmer, a husband, and a dad. But just 2 years before this actual date, he had laid his wife to rest. His kids were grown, and, they had families of their own, moved out, doing their own thing. He no longer had, crops to tend to and a family to provide for. So he was feeling pretty lonely. And he started going into this cafe, and I'm not sure which one it is in Trenton, Tennessee, or which one it was in Trenton, Tennessee, but it was either the Bluebird Cafe or Coleman's Cafe.
Right.
Which is, Coleman's Cafe we're going to talk about next week, but the Bluebird Cafe was actually, I believe, owned by your family.
No, my great-great-grandfather started it.
Okay.
Or owned it at some point, Hearn Bass. And he was also the co-founder of the sale barn in Trenton. So from what I understand is Bluebird was across from the sale barn or in that area. And next week when we talk about Coleman's, it was more just off Court Square.
Right. So he would go in there, and that's kind of where he would meet up with Miss Willie Wallace Shelton. And she was 38 years old. She worked part-time there at this cafe, waitressing. And I'm sure she probably did that to help out with financially. Like I said, she was a married woman. Her husband was F.C. Shelton, and he worked at the Dyer Box Company. She had 3 children and 2 small children still at home, and their ages were 10 and 7 when all this happened. So I'm not exactly sure what this 67-year-old man and, and this 38-year-old wife and mother had in common.
Yeah, I mean, it's 29 years difference in them.
Right. I mean, but evidently they had some type of bond with one another. Mm-hmm. And on April the 9th of 1954, they went out to Lover's Lane. Constable W.T. Pentecost was out on April the 10th to serve a warrant, and he was out on Lover's Lane and in that area, and he came across the vehicle.
Yeah.
So he comes up on this vehicle, and he sees 2 people in the vehicle, and he sees a gun in between them. So he goes and he gets the gun out of the vehicle, out of Miss Shelton's vehicle, and he takes it back to the sheriff's department where Doc Garrison was at, and he was the sheriff at the time. And he and Doc Garrison go back to the crime scene, into the vehicle. They thought, Pentecost thought that this was 2 drunks out there passed out in the vehicle.
Out, yeah.
But he had taken a .22 back into the sheriff's department with him. So I guess at this time, Doc Garrison's just kind of going off word of mouth. I mean, what he heard.
Well, I mean, he shows up with a .22 rifle and says, I took this out of a car. 2 drunks passed out there on Lover's Lane.
Lover's Lane, yeah.
But, how did he not notice the other circumstances?
Like, was there not any blood? And I don't know much.
It was a .22,
Okay.
right? And
Right.
so .22s can penetrate pretty easily, but they don't always exit. So they're not a messy round to use. They don't blow stuff apart and always.
Right.
Now there are forms and versions that can, but in this case, just a regular .22 rifle.
I mean,
Yeah,
you
it's
think
not gonna
about
do a
walking
lot of-
up and seeing 2 people. I mean, if there was no blood, maybe he did. But he got it in the vehicle and got it out.
Yeah.
So R.J. Buckingham was in the right front passenger seat, and his head was rested against the doorpost. He had a bullet in his right temple. The .22 rifle was said to be resting in between, with the butt on the floor in between the 2 bodies. Mr. Buckingham's right hand was lying across his body and said to be touching the gun, which is another thing. If you remove the gun, how do you know his hand was touching the gun?
And better yet, how did you not wake him up?
And it was in his right temple, so he was the passenger.
Yeah, so it was facing out of the car. The entry wound was facing out of the car. Because he was
Okay.
leaned up to the
Right.
the doorpost.
So that would have been the doorpost here.
Yeah.
He'd been shot here.
Yeah.
So I guess he would have had to put the gun on the floor, and he's in one of these bench seats, and put his head down this way and
Yeah.
back. I mean,
maybe.
that's
Maybe.
a pretty long gun, right?
Not particularly.
Or to use in the front seat of a vehicle.
Again, with like a bench seat and an open floorboard, like no console in the way, it probably wouldn't have been that difficult. Yeah.
Right. I mean, like Kurt Cobain used something longer than that.
Yeah, so I just, again, go back to if, Mr. Pentecost took that gun and Buckingham's hand was laying on it.
Did they not use fingerprints then either? Did they not do that in 54? Yeah.
Yeah.
So he just opened the car door and saw 2 people. This is weird.
It's weird.
Okay, so Miss Shelton was found in the front driver's seat of her vehicle, which they were both in her vehicle, and there was a small bullet hole in her right temple, right behind her right eye, but her glasses were still intact, clothes was still intact. She was, I guess, when I come up, he said she looked like she was just passed out asleep.
Yeah.
So there was no struggle, there was no signs or evidence of a struggle. According to Coroner R.O. Pybus, who was able to spend some time out there with with the bodies and the crime scene and kind of set up his and assess what he thought happened out there.
Yeah.
So, but once this got out in Trenton, this was a huge deal because of the location, Lover's Lane. 2 years before that, I think it was like 27 months before these two were found out there, Robert Hayes Phelan and his mistress, Kathleen McCage, were found in the exact same spot.
Yeah.
I mean, Sheriff Doc Garrison said you couldn't have gotten closer with the tape measure. That's
Yeah.
how close it was. So, what was up with this place? Was this cursed? I mean, was this some kind of deranged serial killer that was out and about doing this to people that were carrying out these nighttime affairs? Because there was a lot of killings that were copycat killings to these lovers lanes, murders.
Yeah.
So
And you said they happened at the same time within the window of these.
within
happening.
52 and 54 in, I believe, 8 different states. And I'm going to put some of the newspaper clippings that was sent to us about that too. Yeah. So this kind of brought in TBI, and they're wanting to know what's going on.
Yeah.
Or was it Miss Shelton's husband?
Yeah.
He was taken into custody. Mr. F.C. Shelton was taken into custody, and he gave an alibi. It checked out. It was confirmed, and he was cleared pretty quickly. A witness, R.J. Buckingham's neighbor, who was by the name of Mrs. Jim Brewer, also came forth and stated that she loaned her .22 rifle to Mr. Buckingham that day on April the 9th. He said he was going to do some squirrel hunting. So that pretty much led to our investigators to believe that this was pretty much confirmation. This was a murder-suicide at this time.
Yeah.
So 2 days later, R.O. Pybus, the coroner, goes in front of a secret grand jury, and they come to the conclusion and rule this a murder-suicide.
But now, was any other investigative agency brought into it?
So 1 month later, TBI came in, and they, they're very interested because, hey, we were just here 2 years ago. Actually, we were in this spot 2
same
years
spot,
ago.
yeah.
We were unable to solve that. And this is the one we're covering next week. So they're really wanting to know what's going on. They kind of ruled half and half. It was like some of the TBI believed that there was way more to it, and that it would have been very hard for him to have used that gun in the front seat. But half of them believed that this was a pact that was made between the two.
Yeah.
Murder-suicide. And so it's kind of sad, and it's kind of an oppressed area,
Uh-huh.
So
the later case was ruled by all the authorities a murder-suicide, and I think R.O. Pybus became the longtime investigator for the district attorney's office in Trenton. And there's just not a lot of people around that knew, like R.O. and Doc Garrison and any of the characters associated here. Most of them are gone now.
Right.
There may be one or two. And but the next episode of this is going to contain the juice. This is going to be one that people go,
yes.
something weird's going on there. And it's going to involve people that you don't expect.
Right. It is. I mean, it's prominent families, and there's money, and there's,
Business and all kinds of stuff.
all kinds of business and infidelity and good, juicy things that go along with all this stuff.
So tune in next week for the juice, because that's going to be how we sum all this up and kind of give the full picture of Lover's Lane in Trenton, Tennessee.
That's right.
Yeah, so tune in next week. And while you're watching, don't forget to hit like and subscribe. And again, get involved, get in the conversation, leave us comments.
Please do.
We always like to see how people feel about it and what they think.
Yeah. it's been a long time since, this has happened. So if anybody's got any extra information or if we need to correct anything, that's why I like doing this in two parts, because
Yeah.
it gives us time to correct things and people to come forth and give us maybe a little more information.
Yep.
So it's spooky seasons too. So that's going to be.
Are we gonna have some special episodes?
Well, I think that like people might like to ride out to that area. They always have liked to go out to
Well, like Widow's Pass and Lover's Lane, of course.
right, and to Sleepy Hollow.
Sleepy Hollow, yep. And out where I grew up, we had Shivers Hill.
Yeah.
Which it's gone. It's not there
Yeah.
anymore.
So yeah, we're just kind of bringing in some fun times. People like to get the shit scared out of them.
We talked about this last year about doing things like the Grave of the Eyes and the Dollhouse and stuff
We
like
went
that.
to the Bell Witch Cave.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was a
Yeah.
good time.
Yeah,
Yeah.
So that's another one. You guys ought to check out the Bell Witch Cave.
It's
And
beautiful
It's
there.
up near Nashville, Tennessee. I can't remember the name of that community.
Adams, wasn't it?
Yeah, Adams, Tennessee.
That's right. Yeah.
Adams, Tennessee. And that was the weekend we went to watch Elton John.
That's right.
Yeah. So again, we can throw a shout out there to Jay at Jay's Place on
Yes.
Music Row. That's where we stayed. So I encourage anybody to check that out because that was a really good, really fun place.
Absolutely was. I love that place.
But thank you, everybody. And again, tune in next week for the juice.
Yes. See y'all
All right,
next time.
See you next week.